Okay, you'll have a minute and a half per question, and we'll signal you at 15 seconds. First one, what role does the New Mexico Auditor have relating to the proper use of taxpayer money, and what will you do within that role?
Well, the Auditor's Office is a very special and unique position in New Mexico. You'll have to pardon me for a few throat clearings and coughings, just getting over a cold. So, the Auditor's job is financial oversight over 900 public entities in our state. That means all the cities, all the counties, all the school districts, even acequia associations and land grants. The auditor's job is to make sure your taxpayer dollars are spent wisely and that there's no fraud, waste, or abuse in every level of government around the state. So for me, I don't think anyone actually grows up wanting to be auditor. It's not one of those positions that you sort of gear your life around. But let me tell you this, for me, I think it is a wonderful extension from what I've done in the legislature and from my professional background. And I've gotten to know the Auditor's Office as a current state senator. And a lot of the legislation that I've carried has come from the Auditor's Office, from ideas that came out of audits. And so that's what got me interested in the position. And I feel like for me, it's a way that I can really do much more than what I've done in the legislature as your next state auditor.
Thank you. It has recently been reported that the state of New Mexico has not balanced their general ledger or checkbook for several years. How did this happen? Who is responsible? And what will you do as auditor in regards to this situation?
Well, in all fairness, who's responsible is an interesting question. I can tell you this, it does go back to the previous administration, but the current administration has continued it. And there has also been some IT-related issues with a change in accounting systems. Now, I throw all that out there actually because I don't think any of that is relevant to the problem. The problem is the state of New Mexico has not balanced our checkbook. We know there are at least $100 million essentially missing in unreconcilable accounts, and I think that's wrong. As our state auditor, I am going to make sure DFA does what accounting firms make every private business do, which is you have to own up to that mistake and you have to do a write-off. They've got to admit losing hundreds of millions of dollars, and then we've got to get the books straight going forward. That's the important thing. What I will not do is pass the buck, and that's what's been happening from the past administration to the current administration. No one has wanted to admit that they lost this money, and it's time we do it.
Thank you. In an Albuquerque Journal profile, you recently said, I plan to evaluate the billions our state gives away in special interest tax breaks to gauge their effectiveness in creating jobs and helping all New Mexicans. Since tax policy is set by the New Mexico legislature and the state auditor has limited personnel and resources, please explain how you plan to accomplish that.
This is an issue that I've worked on as a 6-year state senator from Albuquerque's International District. And I have passed something called the tax expenditure budget. This is just an accounting of all our deductions, exemptions, and incentives. And it just says, here's how much we spend, here's how much we get back in terms of jobs and economic benefit. That bill has been vetoed twice, once by Governor Richardson, once by Governor Martinez. That bill had bipartisan support, it had unanimous support, except for one vote each time through. This issue is not about good tax policy, and it should be. Our tax policy is like Swiss cheese, and the holes in it, we know at a minimum are 20%. So 20% of the piece of the cheese is holes. And those holes are these exemptions and deductions. We don't know which ones are good. We don't know if some should be doubled down on because they're so effective at creating jobs. And we don't know which ones are redundant or out of date or not needed. Because no governor, and I mentioned again, both governors vetoed this, they don't want to give up that power to actually have transparency and accountability. And I believe this is really the definition of the auditor's office. It might take me a few years, it might take some budget requests from the administration, but the auditor's office has subpoena power and it has the skill set that can actually do an accounting of all these expenditures. And I plan on, if I'm successful, actually doing our state's first tax expenditure budget and then holding each one of those exemptions and deductions and so forth accountable and saying, these are good, maybe we should do more of them. Or you know what, these are costing us too much money, maybe we should close those loopholes. I just want to have good decision making based on information, and I believe the auditor can actually do that. And I'm testament as a legislator to tell you that the legislature was unable to do that because of vetoes.
Thank you. Now you have 2.5 minutes. Please tell the hiring committee why you believe you are the best candidate to represent New Mexicans as the state auditor.
Thank you. Is this the last one?
Yes.
Wow, that was fast. So, maybe let me just start with this. You know, the auditor's office is all about finding fraud, waste, and abuse, as I mentioned. I want to do a couple of things in addition to that. I don't think the auditor should just be the guy at the end of the line or the woman at the end of the line who says, you know what, everyone else did bad, and I'm going to go crack down on them. I want to try and be helpful in the beginning of the process, and I'm going to try and promote processes and controls and compliance policies that prevent fraud, waste, and abuse from happening in the first place. That's how I think the auditor can actually be helpful, not just punitive. Now, you've got to do what you got to do at the end, but I think it's important that the auditor is not just sitting there waiting for bad stuff to happen. I want to prevent it from happening in the first place. The second thing I want to do is I want to get a handle on red tape in our state. You know, I've run a business and I've been in business for the last 15 years. I still work full-time and happen to be fortunate to have a finance degree from Notre Dame and an MBA from Harvard. And I've used those skills in the private sector. But what I've found, and a lot of you have found this, a lot of you who know what it's like to sign the back and the front of a paycheck, you know that government far too often is just getting in the way of business. And here's the scary thing in New Mexico. We've known this for decades. It's been bipartisan. And still, we have the same complaints from the business community. So I'm going to document that. I'm going to document the red tape. I'm going to find out the filing delays, the extra resources, the amount of accountants and lawyers that businesses need to hire to deal with government. And then I'm going to hold folks accountable for making government appropriate for New Mexicans and helpful instead of harmful to our economy. So the last thing that I want to share with you is this. Our government has hundreds of millions of dollars. I've identified $900 million already of money sloshing around in empty balances, whether it's unused bonding capacity or it's reserves or it's money that's reverting back. $900 million. Imagine what we could do putting that money into the classroom, putting that money into job creation. The reason we have that is because no one has actually looked at the overall problem of how our government manages our money. And they don't do a good job. And I'm going to try and make them do a better job through the audit process. So let me close by touching on a few things. You know, I was born and raised here in New Mexico, in Albuquerque. And I was gone for about 10 years. I went away to school and I worked for some big companies and started a company. And I decided to move back home. I changed my life because I decided I want to get involved in public service in New Mexico because I believe the status quo in New Mexico is absolutely wrong. And it's been that way for a long time. So you're looking at someone who has dedicated my life, and my wife and my 1-year-old, they are fortunately along for the ride. But I want to try and make us not 50th in everything. And I'm giving up my professional career to do that. And I'm coming back home to hopefully be helpful. And that's what I want to do as your next state auditor. For me, this is an opportunity to essentially do what I moved back here to do. And at the end of the day, I think it's this, and I know I'll close here with 15 seconds. Our state auditor, no one really pays attention to this office. It is probably the most important position to your taxpayer dollar in the state of New Mexico. So I hope that you will support individuals who will be helpful, who will prevent fraud and waste and abuse, and also stop it on the back end. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Ladies and gentlemen.